So now that we have the barbell eyes on, I want to talk a little bit about the materials. This is just a plastic mesh tube. The recipe that Clouser has in his book calls this Corsair tubing, and Corsair is a company that does make tubing, but they don't seem to make this, at least I couldn't find it anymore. So I looked around until I found the same stuff. We want to make sure we've got some wraps, some solid wraps around the shank of the hook. We kind of squeeze and pull through our fingers and roll the tubing until it rolls up, and then we want to put the tubing up right at the barbell eyes and take some tight wraps over it going up toward the barbell eyes, and these need to be pretty tight wraps. Then we want to hold the tubing and take some spiral wraps toward the back. We want to go all the way down to the barb at the end of the shank. And by the way, I'm using a saltwater hook. This is a Mustad 2X heavy 4XL hook. You can also tie this on a freshwater hook. As long as it's a 4XL, it should work pretty well. Once we get back near the barb, we want to take a bunch of wraps over to anchor this tubing in place at the back of the shank, and then come forward, and then we'll go back one more time. And once we get back where we were, close to the barb, then we're going to put some chenille in. I'm going to use, this is a 1/0 hook, I'm going to use some mobster chenille, some white mobster chenille. And I'm just going to cut off about 8 or 9 inches of mobster chenille. And the same as any chenille, strip a little bit of the chenille off, covering material off to expose the core. Once we've got the core exposed, we want to tie that down and take some firm wraps over that, and then bring the tying thread back in front of the barbell eyes. And then we're just going to wrap a body of chenille. You can also use ice chenille for this. Estaz, lots of different kinds of things will work. You just need something. And at this point, I'm going to go underneath the far eye and then back over the far eye and come up in front, where I'm going to hold the chenille and tie it off with some tight wraps, and then some wraps around the shank. Then I'm going to trim that off. Okay, now we want to take a rattle. This, after all, is called a rattle clouser. We want to take a rattle, and these rattles, a lot of them have this little cap on the top, whatever that is. And so we want to cut that off, and I just take a pair of wire cutters and grab it with the wire cutters and snip it off. So there's the rattle. When you're fishing this rattle, if you shake them in your hand, you can feel the ball bearings. This one is about 1.25 inches with that cap on it. And if you shake it, you can feel the 3 ball bearings. This one has 3. They do make shorter ones that have 2 ball bearings. And now we want to take the tube and just drop the rattle down through the tube. And once we get to this point, what I want to do is I want to take about 1/2 a turn in the tubing and then push the rattle back to the end. And the reason I take 1/2 a turn is that if you don't, when you pull this tight and tie it down, you'll get this kind of an effect where the rattle wants to pop out the backside of the tube. So I'm going to hold this down and take some tight wraps over the front, and then once I get that seated, secured, I'm going to clip off as close as I can get it the tubing, and then I'm going to kind of smooth everything out. And once we have that, as you know, these will ride upside down in the water. So that's the bottom, this will be the top. I'm going to use, you can use a regular bucktail for this. I'm going to use some faux bucktail by Fish Skull, and it's pretty good stuff. The only thing about it is it does not compress, and it's slick. So if you need to tie it sparse, and I'm going to show you another little trick that I got, I think watching an old Lefty Cray video. He's done some Clousers with bucktail, and he uses this little trick that I'm going to show you. So I want to cut off about a matchstick worth. Because of the way this is made, you're not going to have any waste, you're not going to have any short hairs. Whatever you cut off is what you're going to be able to use. So you can see I got about a matchstick width, and I want this to be about 1.5 to 2 times as long as the shank of the hook. So about there, and I'm going to measure it about where I want it, and then clip it off. Make a huge mess on my tying table. And now here's the Cray trick. I'm using some hardest hull. And the main thing about this is you really want something that's got a brush. So you can use CA glue, you can use Sally Hansen's hard as nails, whatever you want to use. You just want to get a little bit on the brush and then touch the end of the bucktail or the faux bucktail, either way. And then place this down like you would on a Clouser and take some wraps over it. And this is the tricky point, because if you don't get good wraps over this faux bucktail, it will slip out. And the Sally Hansen's or head cement or whatever, there you get the top. That's the first part of it. Now I'm using about 3 or 4 strands of Flashaboo Mirage silver holo tinsel. And I want to cut out 3 or 4 strands. We want to fold it. The technique for Clousers is folding with one end shorter than the other. So we want one end to end kind of in the middle of the bundle, somewhere around, I don't know if you got to have a place somewhere around the bend of the hook. And the other end is going to be as long as the end of the bucktail. And I want this right on top. And then just trim off somewhere around the end of the bucktail. And then this shorter pieces will be in the middle. Now we're going to put pink on top of that. And we want this to be just a little bit bigger, maybe. A little bit bigger bundle than the bundle of white. So we'll trim that off, just like we did the white. And then I want to measure it to be about the same length as the white, and then cut it to length. I'm going to do the same thing with the hardest hull, just get a little bit on the end of the brush and touch the ends with it. Bring the thread up to the top. And then I want to wrap down really hard on this. Put some tension on that. And because this just ends abruptly, don't taper it, because you want everything under. So you're going to have to work on building up a head here. And close up that little gap where the tips in. And once that's closed, grab a whip finish tool, trim it off, a little bit of hardest hull, and there is a rattle Clouser. When you fish this, be sure you don't do it with a straight retrieve. In other words, don't do a continuous retrieve and pull it in. You need to let it sink and then flick it some, jerk it a little bit, because the rattles need to move from end to end on the tube in order to make a sound. This good for bass, smallmouth, largemouth, sea bass, probably some other things too. And try it out. Let me know in the comments how you like it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for all our videos and tight lines.